This Notebook LM video explores how heresy was used by leaders to remove rivals and grab wealth. The persecution of the Cathars in France and the Spanish Inquisition reveal how political conquest often hid behind religious motives. Today, algorithms, influencers, and fact-checkers serve as new gatekeepers, shaping which ideas are promoted or silenced.
Heretic. It's a word that just feels ancient, doesn't it? Kind of medieval. You think of fire and rebellion and really dangerous ideas. But what if I told you the true meaning of heresy isn't really about being wrong? What if it's about something way more fundamental? Something like the simple but profound power of a choice. So yeah, let's just start right there. When you hear the word heretic, what actually comes to mind? A villain? A revolutionary maybe? Or just someone who ended up on the wrong side of history? For centuries, that label was one of the most powerful and dangerous you could ever receive. But here's the twist. The word heresy, it comes directly from the ancient Greek heresis, and all it means is to choose. That's it. So at its absolute core, heresy isn't about evil or making a mistake. It's about the act of making a choice, specifically a choice that goes against the established way of thinking. And that simple act, choosing, would eventually become a capital crime. See, to the people in charge, heresy wasn't just a simple mistake or, a difference of opinion. The real threat of the heretic was that they were an insider. They were part of the community, they professed the faith, and then they actively chose to challenge or corrupt its core beliefs. This was seen as a deep, deep betrayal from within. This quote from Aquinas just nails it. He calls heresy a form of infidelity. A heretic isn't an outsider. They're not an atheist or from some other religion. No, they are a deviant insider. And that is precisely what makes their choice so dangerous to the unity of the group. So how did certain choices become so incredibly dangerous? Well, here's the thing. You can't have heresy without its opposite, orthodoxy, which means correct belief. The two ideas actually create each other. To build a strong, unified community with a clear identity, you have to draw a line in the sand. And this timeline shows that process perfectly. These big, early church councils like Nicaea and Chalcedon, they were all about drawing that line. By creating official creeds and condemning certain beliefs as totally unacceptable, they were forging a single, unified orthodoxy. But in doing that, they also officially created heresy. And as you can see, it really didn't take long for that label to become a death sentence. Okay, so here's the crucial point. This whole conflict, it wasn't just about theology. It was a power struggle. Orthodoxy, that was all about institutional power and keeping the community together. Heresy, on the other hand, was a direct challenge to that authority, often driven by individual conscience. One demands submission, the other demands a choice. And of course, once that line is drawn, the accusation of heresy becomes an unbelievably effective tool. It stops being just a religious idea and turns into a political weapon, used by the powerful to enforce control. And let's be real, the motivations were often far from holy. Calling someone a heretic was a fantastic way to get rid of a political rival, to force everyone to fall in line, to control what people were allowed to learn, and yeah, let's not forget, to seize their land and money. It put a divine seal of approval on some very earthly goals. The Cathars are just a tragic, perfect example of this. Were their beliefs different from mainstream Catholicism? Oh, absolutely. But the crusade to wipe them out was just as much about the King of France wanting to crush the independent nobles of southern France and grab their very prosperous lands. Heresy was the excuse for conquest. The damage from these persecutions is just staggering, and it lasts for centuries. Modern research on the Spanish Inquisition has found that even today, the regions where it was most active have lower incomes, lower levels of education, and way less social trust. The fear it created literally reshaped society for generations to come. But this is where the story gets really complicated, because the label heretic is always written by the winners. And as power shifts and values change over time, yesterday's villain can easily become today's visionary. I mean, just think about these figures for a second. Joan of Arc was executed as a heretic, only to be made a saint centuries later. Galileo was condemned for challenging religious dogma with scientific fact. Others, like Giordano Bruno, were burned alive for daring to imagine a universe far, far bigger than the one the church allowed. They all chose to defy the establishment, and while they paid a terrible price, history ended up proving their heretical ideas right. So it really makes you wonder, right? What's the difference? Is it just the passage of time, a change in who's holding the power? It forces us to ask how much of our own history is shaped by the ideas that won, and how many brilliant ideas were lost forever simply because they were successfully stamped out. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is all ancient history. But the fundamental human dynamic of heresy, of defining an us by punishing a them for their dangerous ideas, that never went away. The battleground just changed. Today, it's moved online.
The gatekeepers look different, but their job is eerily similar. The church and the state used to decide what was acceptable information. Today, social media algorithms, online influencers, and corporate fact-checkers shape our reality, boosting some ideas while suppressing or straight-up deplatforming others.
And you see this dynamic everywhere. People being publicly shamed or kicked off platforms for political wrongthink. Conspiracy theories that create their own super rigid orthodoxies. You even see digital heresy hunts where online communities seek out and punish anyone who deviates from the group's approved beliefs. The tools are new, but the behavior is ancient. And this is the key takeaway. The specific beliefs change over time, but the social mechanism, it stays exactly the same. It doesn't matter if it's a 13th century church council or a 21st century social media platform. Human groups have this tendency to define who we are by aggressively pointing out who they are and why their ideas are a threat to the tribe.
So we're left with this. Heresy began as a simple choice. It became a crime, a weapon, and sometimes a badge of honor. Today, in a world that is just overflowing with information and competing truths, the question isn't whether heresies still exist. The question is, who gets to decide what they are?